In the scorching heart of the Mojave Desert, where most men see only sand and death, one broke cowboy named Jake Morrison was about to discover that kindness can bridge worlds. What started as a simple act of compassion, sharing his last can of beans with a strange, dying creature, would transform into an encounter that defied everything humanity thought it knew about the universe. When mysterious warriors appeared at his doorstep the following dawn, speaking of ancient debts and cosmic honor, Jake realized that his small gesture had awakened something far greater than himself. This is the story of how a penniless drifter became the most unlikely ally to an intergalactic empire, and how one night in the desert changed not just his fate, but the destiny of Earth itself. What happens when legends become real? What price comes with the loyalty of warriors from beyond the stars? The answers lie in the dust, the stars, and the choices of one man who had nothing left to lose. Jake Morrison had reached the end of his rope, and he knew it. The sun was setting over the Nevada desert, painting the sky in shades of blood orange and purple, and he sat on the hood of his rusted pickup truck, staring at the last $23 to his name. The bills were crumpled, stained with sweat and regret. Behind him, his entire life was packed into cardboard boxes. What little remained after the bank took his family's ranch, the place where 3 generations of Morrisons had worked the land, raised cattle, and believed in the promise of an honest day's work. That promise, Jake had learned, was as empty as his wallet. The drought had lasted 5 years. The cattle had died or been sold at a loss. The bank had been patient at first, then coldly efficient. Now, at 34 years old, Jake was driving toward nowhere with no plan beyond finding work in the next town, wherever that might be. His weathered face, lined beyond his years, reflected a man who had fought hard and lost harder. His calloused hands gripped the steering wheel of a truck that barely ran, held together by duct tape and desperate prayers. The desert highway stretched endlessly before him, empty except for the occasional tumbleweed. He'd chosen this route because the interstate required gas money he didn't have. Out here, in the backroads where civilization forgot to tread, a man could think. Or a man could disappear. Sometimes Jake wasn't sure which option appealed to him more. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped rapidly, as it always did in the desert. Jake pulled on his worn denim jacket, the one with his grandfather's name stitched inside the collar. He'd been driving for 6 hours when the truck's engine began to sputter. The temperature gauge climbed into the red zone, and Jake cursed under his breath. He coaxed the vehicle another 2 miles before it died completely, rolling to a stop on the shoulder of the road. Perfect. Just perfect. Jake stepped out into the night, popping the hood to reveal an engine that looked as defeated as he felt. Steam rose from the radiator. Without water and without coolant, he wasn't going anywhere. He checked his phone, no signal, naturally. The nearest town was 40 miles back, and he'd be damned if he was walking that distance in the dark. He decided to make camp. From the truck bed, he retrieved a sleeping bag, a camping stove, and his last can of beans. His stomach had been growling for hours, but he'd been rationing his food, making it last. Tomorrow he'd figure something out. Tonight, he'd eat, sleep, and try not to think about how completely his life had fallen apart. Jake set up the small stove and opened the can of beans, watching them heat slowly. The desert night was alive with sounds, the distant howl of coyotes, the whisper of wind across sand, the endless silence of a world that didn't care whether he lived or died. Above him, stars stretched across the sky in a brilliant display that no city dweller could ever imagine. Out here, the Milky Way wasn't just visible. It dominated, a river of light that made him feel infinitely small. He was stirring the beans when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong. A scraping, dragging noise like something heavy being pulled across gravel. Jake froze, his hand moving instinctively to the tire iron he kept beside him. The sound came from beyond the reach of his small camping light, out in the darkness where anything could hide. "Who's there?" He called out, his voice steadier than he felt. The dragging sound stopped. Then, slowly, something moved into the dim circle of light. Jake's breath caught in his throat. His mind struggled to process what his eyes were seeing, because it couldn't be real. It couldn't be. The creature was roughly humanoid in shape, but utterly alien in every detail. It stood perhaps 6 feet tall, though it was hunched over, clearly injured or exhausted. Its skin was covered in scales that caught the light with an iridescent sheen, shifting between deep green and bronze. The head was elongated, reptilian, with large eyes that reflected his camping light like a cat's, but these eyes held an intelligence that was unmistakably sentient. Its body was lean, almost skeletal, and one of its arms hung at an odd angle, clearly broken or damaged. Most disturbing were the wounds. The creature was covered in them, burn marks, gashes, some still oozing a dark fluid that might have been blood. It moved with the desperate, shambling gait of something that had been through hell and barely survived. Jake should have run. Every survival instinct screamed at him to get in the truck, lock the doors, and figure out the engine problem through sheer force of will. But he didn't run. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was the fact that a man who's lost everything has very little left to fear. Or maybe it was something in those eyes, a pain, an exhaustion he recognized all too well. The creature stopped at the edge of the light, swaying slightly. It made a sound, a low clicking noise that might have been communication, or might have been the sound of dying. Its good arm gestured weakly toward the can of beans, then toward its own mouth. The gesture was universal, transcending species and worlds. It was hungry, starving by the looks of it. Jake looked at the beans, his last meal. He looked at the creature impossible, terrifying, and clearly desperate. For a long moment, the desert held its breath. Then Jake did something that would change his life forever. He picked up the can and held it out. The creature's eyes widened, and it made a sound that might have been surprise. It moved forward slowly, carefully, as if expecting a trick. When it reached the can, it looked at Jake with an expression he couldn't quite read, then tilted the can to its mouth and drank the beans greedily, desperately. Within seconds, the can was empty. Jake watched, his heart pounding as the creature finished eating. It lowered the can and stood straighter, some small measure of strength returning. Then it did something unexpected. It pressed its good hand to its chest and bowed its head slightly, a gesture of gratitude that needed no translation. "You're welcome," Jake said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. The creature looked at him for a long moment, those alien eyes studying him with an intensity that made Jake feel like he was being memorized, cataloged, understood in a way that went beyond words. Then it turned and walked back into the darkness, its dragging footsteps fading into the night until even the sound was gone, leaving Jake alone with the stars and a profound sense that he'd just crossed some invisible line between the life he'd known and something entirely different. He didn't sleep much that night. When he finally dozed off, his dreams were filled with stars and scales and eyes that saw through him to something deeper. Jake thought about the wounded creature that had accepted his beans with such evident gratitude. That one didn't seem dangerous. It seemed desperate, which is exactly what concerns us. The Saurians don't ask for help, Mr. Morrison. They don't show weakness. They don't accept charity from species they consider inferior, and make no mistake, they consider us very inferior. What you did last night was either incredibly stupid or incredibly significant, and we're not sure which. Before Jake could respond, the door burst open. A young officer, out of breath, thrust a phone toward Martinez. "Colonel, you need to see this. Now." Martinez took the phone, her expression darkening as she watched whatever was displayed. When she looked up at Jake, her entire demeanor had changed. "We have a situation. Come with me." They rushed through corridors to what appeared to be a command center. Multiple screens showed various feeds, satellite imagery, radar displays, and several showing the desert landscape around the facility. But one screen dominated the center, showing a live camera feed of the facility's main gate. Jake's breath caught. Standing outside the gate were 12 figures. They were tall, easily 7 feet, and wore armor that looked like it had been forged from starlight and shadow. Each carried weapons, long spears, curved blades, devices that Jake couldn't identify but that hummed with barely contained energy. And each one was clearly saurian, their scaled skin visible where armor didn't cover them. But these weren't wounded stragglers. These were warriors in their prime, radiating power and purpose. At their head stood one who was slightly larger than the others, wearing armor decorated with markings that suggested rank. This one held no weapon. Instead, both hands were raised, palms forward, in what might have been a gesture of peace. "They've been there for 20 minutes, someone reported. "They haven't moved, haven't responded to our hails. They're just waiting." "Waiting for what?" Martinez demanded. As if in answer, the lead Saurian spoke. Its voice boomed from the speakers, translated by some device it wore. "We seek the human called Jake Morrison. We come to honor a debt. We come to pledge our service. Bring forth the one who showed mercy to our scout, and we shall offer him the loyalty of the Imperial Guard." The command center erupted in chaos. Martinez turned to Jake, her expression a mixture of disbelief and something that might have been fear. "What the hell did you do out there?" Jake stared at the screen, at the warriors who had traveled from God knows where, who had somehow tracked him to this secret facility, and who were now demanding to see him. He thought about the wounded creature, about the last can of beans, about a simple act of kindness that had seemed so insignificant in the moment. "I just shared my dinner," he said quietly. Jake woke to the sound of engines, not his broken-down truck, but multiple vehicles approaching from both directions. He sat up in his sleeping bag, squinting against the bright morning sun, and felt his stomach drop. 3 black SUVs were pulling up around his position, forming a loose perimeter. They had government plates. Men in dark suits emerged, along with 2 individuals in military uniforms. One of them, a woman with steel gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd seen combat, approached with her hand resting casually on her sidearm. "Jake Morrison?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "That's me," Jake said, slowly getting to his feet. "What's this about?" "I'm Colonel Sarah Martinez, U.S. Air Force Special Operations. We need to ask you some questions about what you saw last night." Jake's mind raced. How could they possibly know? He'd been alone in the middle of nowhere. Unless they'd been tracking that creature. "I didn't see anything," he said carefully. Martinez smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Mr. Morrison, 17 hours ago, an unidentified object crash-landed approximately 3 miles from this location. Shortly after, our satellites detected thermal signatures consistent with a survivor moving through the desert. That signature led directly to your current position, where it remained for 11 minutes before departing. So let's try this again. What did you see?" Jake's throat felt dry. He thought about lying, but what was the point? They clearly had evidence. "I saw something," he admitted. "Some kind of creature. It was hurt, hungry. I gave it food." The reaction from the assembled personnel was immediate. Whispers, exchanged glances, someone speaking urgently into a radio. Martinez's expression remained neutral, but Jake saw something flicker in her eyes, surprise, perhaps, or concern. "You fed it?" she asked. "It was starving. What was I supposed to do?" "Most people would have run, or called authorities, or armed themselves." Martinez studied him with renewed interest. "Instead, you gave it your food. It was just beans," Jake said. "I had a can. It needed it more than I did." Martinez was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Mr. Morrison, I need you to come with us. This is a matter of national security." "Am I under arrest?" "Not yet. But that could change depending on your cooperation." Jake looked at his broken-down truck. His entire life packed into boxes that smelled of failure and dust. Where else did he have to go? Fine, he said. But someone's going to have to tow my truck. They drove him to a facility he didn't recognize, buried in the desert far from any town. The compound was surrounded by fences topped with razor wire, and guard towers watched every approach. Inside, he was led through a series of security checkpoints, each more elaborate than the last, until finally he was seated in an interrogation room that looked like something from a spy movie. Martinez sat across from him, a tablet computer in front of her. For 3 hours, she asked him questions. What he saw, what he heard, how the creature moved, what it looked like, every detail he could remember. Jake answered honestly, partly because he had nothing to hide, and partly because he was genuinely curious about what the hell was going on. Finally, Martinez sat back and rubbed her eyes. "You have no idea what you've done," she said quietly. "Apparently not. Want to enlighten me?" She seemed to consider this, then made a decision. "What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. The creature you encountered is what we call a saurian, a member of an advanced reptilian species that has been visiting Earth for thousands of years. They're warriors, explorers, and according to most reports, extremely dangerous." The debate in the command center was heated and intense. Military advisors argued for mobilizing additional forces. Intelligence officers wanted to stall while they gathered more information. Someone suggested a preemptive strike, which was immediately shouted down. Through it all, the 12 warriors remained at the gate, unmoving as statues, waiting with the patience of beings who had seen millennia pass. Colonel Martinez pulled Jake aside. "This is unprecedented," she said, her voice low. "The Saurians have observed Earth for thousands of years, but they've never made formal contact. They've certainly never offered allegiance to a human. We have no protocol for this. So what do you want me to do?" Jake asked. "I want you to understand what's at stake. If those warriors decide we're hostile, they could level this facility in minutes. Our weapons might slow them down, but their technology is centuries ahead of ours. However, if we can establish a dialogue, if we can understand what they want, ... She paused. "This could change everything we know about our place in the universe. They want to talk to me," Jake said simply. "So maybe you should let them." 20 minutes later, Jake walked toward the main gate, flanked by Martinez and 4 heavily armed soldiers. He'd refused body armor, figuring that if the aliens wanted him dead, fabric and ceramic plates wouldn't make much difference. As he approached, he could see the warriors more clearly, and the sight was even more impressive than it had been on the monitors. Their armor was a work of art, each piece engraved with symbols and patterns that seemed to shift in the sunlight. The weapons they carried hummed with a low frequency that Jake could feel in his bones. But it was their eyes that caught his attention. The same intelligent, penetrating gaze he'd seen in the wounded creature, but multiplied and backed by unmistakable power. The gate opened. Jake stepped through. The lead warrior stepped forward, and Jake had to crane his neck to meet its gaze. Up close, he could see that this one's scales were darker than the others, almost black, with veins of gold running through them. The armor bore symbols that Jake instinctively understood meant leadership, authority, earned respect. "I am Commander Vex Thora of the Saurian Imperial Guard," the warrior said, its translated voice deep and resonant. "You are Jake Morrison, the human who offered sustenance to Scout Keeper Zinrith?" "I'm Jake," he confirmed, surprised his voice didn't shake. "I met someone last night. Gave them some food. Didn't catch a name. Something that might have been a smile flickered across Rex Thora's reptilian features. Names are earned in our culture, human Jake. Scout Keeper is a rank, a role. The individual you aided has served the Empire for 300 of your years. In all that time, through countless battles and explorations, Zinrith has never accepted help from a species we were observing. To do so would be considered a profound weakness, a failure of duty. Jake shifted uncomfortably. I didn't mean to cause problems. They looked hurt and hungry. You offered kindness to a stranger who could have killed you, Vexthora interrupted. You shared what little you possessed without expectation of reward or recognition. You saw suffering and responded with compassion. The warrior's voice grew softer, almost reverent. These are the marks of true nobility, Jake Morrison. In my culture, such an act creates a debt that must be repaid. There's no debt, Jake protested. It was just beans. For you, perhaps. For Zinrith, it was life itself. Our scout was dying, poisoned by atmospheric contaminants from the damaged vessel, weakened by injuries sustained in the crash. Without sustenance, Zinrith would have perished within hours. You saved a life. More than that, you reminded us of something our empire has forgotten over millennia of conquest and expansion. What's that? Jake asked. That honor exists beyond the battlefield. That mercy has value. That kindness is not weakness, but the highest form of strength. Vexthora placed a clawed hand over its chest, in a gesture identical to the one the wounded Saurian had made the night before. When Zinrith returned to our vessel and reported what had occurred, the story spread through our ranks like fire. The warrior who accepts no help accepted help from a human, a species we have observed but never truly seen. The commander gestured to the 11 warriors behind it. We are the Imperial Guard, Jake Morrison. We serve only those we deem worthy, those who embody the virtues our empire was founded upon. For 5,000 years, we have served our emperor without question. But last night, a poor human in a broken vehicle showed more nobility than we have witnessed in our own royal courts in centuries. Jake's head was spinning. I don't understand. What are you saying? Vexthora lowered itself to one knee. Behind it, the other 11 warriors did the same, their armor clanking in perfect synchronization. We are saying that we offer you our loyalty, Jake Morrison. We pledge our service, our strength, our lives to your cause. If you will have us, we shall be your guard, your army, your champions. This is the way of our people. Honor demands nothing less. Jake stared at the kneeling warriors, these legendary beings from beyond the stars, offering their allegiance to a broke cowboy who couldn't even keep his family ranch. Behind him, he heard gasps and urgent whispered conversations. Colonel Martinez looked like she might faint. I can't accept this, Jake said finally. I'm nobody. I've got nothing. I don't even know what I'm going to do tomorrow, let alone what I do with an army of alien warriors. Vexthora looked up, and in those ancient eyes, Jake saw understanding. Perhaps that is precisely why you are worthy. You have nothing, yet you gave freely. You owe nothing, yet you showed mercy. You gain nothing from us, yet you hesitate to accept out of genuine humility. The warrior stood, and the others followed. The offer remains, Jake Morrison. Should you ever need us, should you ever call upon us, we shall come. This is our oath, sworn on the honor of the Imperial Guard. It cannot be unspoken. Before Jake could respond, an alarm blared from the facility. Martinez's radio crackled to life with urgent voices. She listened for a moment, her face going pale, then looked at Jake and Vexthora. We have incoming, she said. Multiple spacecraft, unknown configuration. They're demanding we hand over the Saurian warriors. She paused. They say the warriors are traitors to the Empire. They say they've come to execute them. And they're powering weapons. Vexthora's expression hardened. So it begins, the warrior said quietly. The Emperor has learned of our oath. He will not tolerate warriors who serve another. He will destroy this facility and everyone in it to make his point. Jake looked at the sky, where he could now see lights descending, dozens of them, growing brighter by the second. He thought about the hundreds of personnel inside the facility, about Colonel Martinez and the soldiers who'd done nothing wrong except be in the wrong place at the wrong time. He thought about how his simple act of kindness had spiraled into something he never could have imagined. And then he thought about what was right. "Commander Vestura," he said, his voice steady despite the terror coursing through him. "If your offer is real, if you truly pledge your service to me, then I'm calling on it now. Protect this facility. Protect these people. Can you do that?" The warrior's eyes blazed with something that might have been joy. "It would be our honor. Jake Morrison." Vestura turned to the other warriors and spoke in its own language, a series of clicks and growls that nonetheless conveyed clear purpose. The Imperial Guard moved with sudden, explosive speed. They formed a defensive perimeter around the facility, their weapons coming alive with energy that lit up the desert. And Jake Morrison, bro Cowboy from Nevada, watched as the sky filled with alien warships and realized that his life would never be simple again. The first wave of attack came swift and merciless. Energy beams lanced down from the descending ships, targeting the positions where the Imperial Guard stood. But Vestura and the warriors moved with impossible speed and coordination, their armor generating shields that deflected the blasts into the desert sand, turning it to glass in massive circles around the facility. Jake had been pulled back inside by Martinez and her team, but he pressed against the reinforced windows of the command center, watching the battle unfold. It was like nothing he'd ever imagined, warriors leaping 30 feet into the air, weapons that seemed to bend reality itself, ships that moved like living things through the sky. "Those are Imperial enforcers." Vestura's voice came through a communicator the warrior had left with Jake. "The Emperor's executioners. They are efficient, ruthless, and trained to hunt warriors like us. But they have forgotten what it means to fight for something beyond orders, beyond empire. Today, they face warriors who have remembered their purpose." One of the enforcers managed to land, disgorging a squad of Saurian soldiers in crimson armor. They moved toward the facility in formation, weapons raised. Two of the Imperial Guard intercepted them, moving so fast they were almost invisible. The clash was brutal and brief. Within seconds, the Crimson soldiers were down, their armor smoking. But more ships were coming. Jake could see at least 30 now, filling the sky like a swarm of metal locusts. "There are too many," he said into the communicator. "You can't fight them all." "We can try," Vestura replied, and there was something like laughter in the warrior's voice. "It has been a long time since we fought for something that mattered. Jake Morrison. Win or lose, this is a good death. I don't want you to die for me," Jake said, surprised by the intensity of his own emotion. "I didn't ask for this. No, you simply show kindness. The consequences are ours to bear." In the command center, military advisors were shouting recommendations: evacuate, call in air support, attempt diplomatic contact. Martinez silenced them all. "None of our weapons will be effective against that technology," she said bluntly. "If we engage, we'll just give them an excuse to level everything within 100 miles. Our only chance is if those 12 warriors can hold them off long enough for help to arrive." "Why help?" someone asked. Martinez didn't answer, but Jake saw her exchange a glance with a communications officer who was typing frantically at her console. They were calling someone, somewhere. But who would believe this? Who could respond to an alien invasion in the middle of the Nevada desert? Outside, the battle intensified. The Imperial Guard had split into groups of 3, each squad defending a different approach to the facility. They fought with a grace and precision that seemed almost choreographed, but Jake could see they were being pushed back. For every enforcer ship they disabled, 2 more appeared. Then something changed. One of the larger vessels, a massive dreadnought that dwarfed the others, descended until it hovered directly above the facility. A beam of purple light shot down, and where it struck, the ground itself seemed to ripple and distort. When the light faded, a figure stood there, a Saurian larger than any Jake had seen, wearing armor that looked like it had been forged from the heart of a star. General Cruthar, Vexthura's voice came through, tight with tension. The Emperor's champion. He has come himself. The general's voice boomed across the desert, amplified by technology. Commander Vexthura, you and your warriors are guilty of treason against the Saurian Empire. Renounce your oath to this human, accept your execution with honor, and the facility will be spared. Refuse, and everything here will be reduced to ash. Jake grabbed the communicator. Commander, accept his terms. I'm not worth this. I'm not worth any of this. You are wrong, Jake Morrison, Vexthura replied. You are worth precisely this much. The Empire has grown corrupt, valuing power over principle, conquest over compassion. For too long, we have followed orders that conflicted with our conscience, telling ourselves we served a greater good. But when Zinrith told us the story of a human who gave his last food to a dying stranger, we saw reflected back at us what we had become, creatures who had forgotten why we became warriors in the first place. The commander's voice grew stronger. You offered us redemption, Jake Morrison, not through grand gestures or mighty deeds, but through simple kindness. We will not abandon that. We will not abandon you. And we will not let these people die for our choice. Vexthura stepped forward to face General Cruthar. The two massive warriors stood 20 feet apart, the desert wind whipping sand between them. I refuse your terms, General. This human and this facility are under our protection. If you wish to execute us, you must first defeat us in combat. Cruthar laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. 12 against my army? You have gone mad, Commander. Perhaps, Vexthura agreed, but we have also gone free. For the first time in centuries, we fight not because we are ordered, but because we choose. Can you say the same? For a moment, something flickered across Cruthar's features, doubt, perhaps, or old memories. Then it was gone, replaced by cold purpose. So be it. You die as traitors. The general raised his weapon, and the sky itself seemed to darken. But before he could fire, another voice echoed across the desert, weaker than the others, but filled with determination. Wait. From between the warriors of the Imperial Guard stepped a creature Jake had fed the night before Scout-Keeper Zinrith, still wounded but upright, still weak but unbowed. The scout limped toward General Cruthar, and Jake could see that every step cost it dearly. General Cruthar, Zinrith said, its voice transmitted through the same communicator. Before you execute these warriors, you must execute me as well. I am the one who accepted help from the human. I am the one who broke tradition, and I tell you now, I do not regret it. In my 300 years of service, I have conquered worlds and fought in 1,000 battles, but I have never been shown the mercy I was shown last night. I have never witnessed the nobility I witnessed in that simple act. These warriors stand here because they, like me, remember what our ancestors taught us, that true strength lies not in domination, but in choosing when to show mercy and when to fight. If that is treason, then I am guilty. If that is madness, then I am mad. But I am also, for the first time in my long life, proud of who I am. The scout's words hung in the air. Around the perimeter, Jake saw several of the Enforcer warriors shift uncomfortably. Some lowered their weapons slightly. Zinrith's speech had struck something deep, had awakened questions that military discipline demanded remain buried. General Cruthar looked at his forces, saw the hesitation, and his expression twisted with rage. Enough of this. If you will not execute traitors, I will do it myself. He raised his weapon, a massive cannon that crackled with barely contained energy, and aimed it directly at Zinrith. Jake didn't think. He ran. He burst through the facility doors despite Martinez's shouts, despite the guards trying to grab him, despite every rational thought screaming at him to stay inside. He ran into the desert, into the no-man's land between warriors and armies, and threw himself in front of Zinrith. No, he shouted. You want to kill someone? Kill me. I'm the one who started this. I'm the one who fed Zinrith. I'm the one they swore loyalty to." Time seemed to freeze. General Crothar stared at this human who had appeared from nowhere, this insignificant creature standing between him and his target, arms spread wide, protecting a wounded scout. Around them, warriors from both sides watched in stunned silence. "Get out of the way, human," Crothar growled. "This does not concern you." "The hell it doesn't," Jake shot back. "These warriors offered me their loyalty because I showed basic human decency. If that's a crime in your empire, then your empire is broken. And I won't stand by while you execute people for doing the right thing." "The right thing?" Crothar's laugh was bitter. "You know nothing of what is right. You are a primitive creature from a primitive world. You have no authority here." "Maybe not," Jake agreed. "But I have something you've forgotten. I have a choice. And I choose to stand with them." For a long moment, General Crothar simply stared at Jake. Then, slowly, the general lowered his weapon. "You are either the bravest human I have encountered or the most foolish. Perhaps both." He turned to address his forces. "Warriors of the enforcement corps. This is what the Emperor's rule has brought us to, pointing weapons at those who show mercy, executing comrades who remember honor, threatening to destroy primitives who demonstrate more nobility than we have seen in our own ranks in generations. Is this what we have become? Is this what we serve?" The question hung in the air like a thunderclap. And in that moment, Jake saw that General Crothar had never intended to fire. The general had been testing not Jake, but his own warriors, showing them what their loyalty demanded, forcing them to see the choice before them. One by one, the enforcer warriors began to lower their weapons. Some dropped to one knee in the same gesture of fealty the Imperial Guard had shown. Others simply stood silent, no longer willing to follow orders that violated everything they'd once believed. General Crothar smiled, a terrifying expression on his reptilian features. "It seems, Commander Vexthora, that your oath has sparked a rebellion. The Emperor will not forgive this. None of us can return to the Empire now. Then perhaps," Vexthora said quietly, "it is time we found something worth serving beyond the Empire." The general looked at Jake. "You have changed much with your simple kindness, human Jake Morrison. I hope you understand what you have begun." Jake looked at the hundreds of Saurian warriors surrounding him at the ships filling the sky at the scout. He'd fed with his last can of beans, and at the command center, where terrified humans watched this impossible scene unfold. He thought about the ranch he'd lost, the life that had fallen apart, the despair that had driven him into the desert with nothing but a broken truck and fading hope. And he realized that sometimes the end of one life was just the beginning of another. "I don't understand any of this," he admitted, "but I'm willing to learn." The next 72 hours passed in a blur that felt like living through a fever dream. The facility, designed to hold perhaps 300 personnel, suddenly became the informal headquarters for what was being called the Saurian defection. Over 400 alien warriors who had turned their backs on an interstellar empire. Jake's role in all this remained unclear, even to him, but he found himself at the center of endless meetings, discussions, and decisions that felt far beyond his capabilities. Colonel Martinez, to her credit, adapted faster than most. Within hours of the standoff's resolution, she'd established communication protocols with the Saurian commanders and arranged for emergency supplies. By the second day, military leaders and government officials were arriving from Washington, and Jake found himself in the surreal position of being asked to vouch for aliens who'd been strangers to Earth 3 days ago. "They're going to make you a scapegoat or a hero," Martinez told him during a rare, quiet moment. "Maybe both. You do realize that, right?" Jake sat in what had become his unofficial office, a converted storage room with a cot and a coffee maker. "I just wanted to get to the next town and find work," he said tiredly. "Now, I am apparently some kind of ambassador to an alien species that everyone on Earth is terrified of. Are you terrified of them?" Martinez asked. Jake thought about it. He thought about Zinrith, still recovering in the facility's medical wing, who thanked him in halting English for giving life and honor back. He thought about Commander Vex Thora, who'd patiently explained Saurian culture and history during long evening conversations. He thought about General Crothar, who'd revealed that he'd been looking for an excuse to break from the Empire for decades, waiting for a sign that honor still existed in the universe. "No," Jake said finally. "I'm not terrified. They're warriors, yeah, and they could probably tear this building apart with their bare hands. But they're also decent. They have codes, principles. They care about things beyond just power." He laughed softly. "Hell, they might be more honorable than half the people I knew back home." Martinez nodded slowly. "The president wants to meet you. Tomorrow. They're sending a helicopter." "Of course they are," Jake muttered. But the meeting with the president never happened. That night, everything changed again. Jake was awakened by alarms and the sound of Vex Thora's voice booming through the facility SPA system. "All personnel to defensive positions. We have incoming. Imperial forces. 10 times our number. They are not here to negotiate." Jake scrambled out of bed and ran to the command center, arriving just as the first explosions lit up the night sky. The screen showed a nightmare massive warships, far larger than anything they'd seen before, descending through Earth's atmosphere. These weren't enforcer vessels. These were capital ships, planet breakers, the kind of firepower that could reduce continents to rubble. "The Emperor has sent the Annihilation Fleet." General Crothar's voice came through, grim and resigned. "He will not accept our defection. He will destroy this entire region to make an example. I estimate we have 30 minutes before they achieve firing position." 30 minutes, Martinez repeated numbly. "We need to evacuate. Get everyone out now." But Jake was doing the math. 400 warriors, 300 facility personnel, vehicles that would take 20 minutes just to mobilize. They'd never make it. And even if they did, where would they go? The Annihilation Fleet would track them, hunt them, obliterate them wherever they fled. "There has to be another way," Jake said. "There isn't," Crothar replied. "We made our choice. Now we face the consequences. At least Earth will know that we stood for something in the end." Jake stared at the screens, at the descending death, and felt a rage building inside him, not at the Saurians who'd come to kill them, but at the waste of it all. These warriors had rediscovered honor, had chosen principle over empire, had risked everything because of a simple act of kindness. And now they would die for it, along with hundreds of innocent humans who'd done nothing except be in the wrong place. It wasn't right. It wasn't fair. And Jake Morrison, who'd spent his life being beaten down by circumstances beyond his control, who'd lost everything to forces he couldn't fight, decided he'd had enough of accepting the inevitable. "Commander Vestora," he said into the communicator, his voice steadier than he felt. "You swore loyalty to me, right? You said you'd serve my cause, follow my orders?" "We did," Vestora confirmed, confusion evident in the warrior's tone. "Until death and beyond. Then I'm giving you an order. Don't fight. Silence." "Then, Jake Morrison, I do not understand. If we do not fight, we die. Everyone dies." "Maybe," Jake said. "Or maybe we do something that empire of yours has forgotten how to do. Maybe we take a risk on trust." He took a deep breath. "Open a channel to the Annihilation Fleet. I want to talk to whoever's in command." "Jake, that's insane," Martinez protested. "They won't listen. They're here to destroy us." "They're here to destroy traitors," Jake corrected. "Well, I'm not a traitor. I'm just a human who fed a hungry stranger. Let me talk to them. What do we have to lose?" After a moment of heated discussion among the Saurian commanders, Vex Thora's voice returned. "The channel is open. You are speaking to Fleet Commander Zarkesh, Lord of the Annihilation Fleet, voice of the Emperor's wrath. He has agreed to hear you before he destroys us. You have 2 minutes. Jake's mouth went dry, but he forced himself to speak. Fleet Commander Zarkesh, my name is Jake Morrison. I'm a human from Earth. 3 days ago, I met one of your scouts in the desert. It was hurt and starving, so I shared my food with it. That's the whole story. That's the crime that started all this. He paused, gathering his thoughts. On the screens, the warships continued their descent, weapons charging with energy that made the air itself crackle. I know your warriors down here broke your laws. I know they defied your emperor by swearing loyalty to me. But here is what I also know. They did it because one simple act of kindness reminded them of something they'd lost: honor, purpose, the reason they became warriors. In the first place, Jake's voice grew stronger. You're about to kill 400 of the finest warriors your empire has ever produced. You're about to destroy them because they remembered what honor means. Because they chose to protect the weak instead of slaughter them. Because they stood up for what was right even when it cost them everything. He looked at the screens, at the massive ships that could end all their lives in seconds. Is that really what your empire has become? A place where showing mercy is treason, where kindness is weakness, where warriors are executed for having a conscience. You know nothing of our empire. Human, came the reply, a voice like grinding continents, ancient and cold. You know nothing of the order we maintain, the chaos we prevent. These warriors swore oaths to the emperor. They broke those oaths. That is all that matters. No, Jake said firmly. That's not all that matters. What matters is why they broke those oaths. What matters is that your emperor sent you to kill warriors who were doing the right thing. What matters is that somewhere along the way, your empire forgot that true loyalty isn't blind obedience. It is having the courage to stand up when your leaders are wrong. You dare lecture me about loyalty? You dare question the emperor's judgment? Yeah, I do, Jake said. Because I'm not part of your empire. I'm not bound by your oaths or your traditions. I'm just a guy who shared some beans with someone who needed them. And I'm telling you right now, if you destroy these warriors, if you kill everyone here just to prove a point, then your empire is already dead. It's just too stupid to know it yet. The silence that followed felt like it lasted hours. Jake could hear his own heartbeat, could feel sweat running down his back. Martinez looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. Then Fleet Commander Zarkesh spoke again, and there was something different in his voice, not anger, but something that might have been pain. You are right, human Jake Morrison. The empire is dying. It has been dying for 1,000 years, choking on its own corruption and cruelty. We who serve it know this truth, but we do not speak it, because to speak it would be to admit that we have wasted our lives serving a lie. The commander's voice grew quieter. I came here prepared to destroy you all. I came here prepared to execute warriors I have fought beside, bled beside, called comrades for centuries. I came here prepared to do my duty, but I find that I cannot. Because you, a primitive human with nothing to gain and everything to lose, have shown more courage in 3 minutes than I have shown in 300 years. On the screens, the warships began to change position. But they weren't attacking, they were landing. One by one, the massive vessels descended, their weapons powering down, their shields dropping. What's happening? Martinez whispered. Fleet Commander Zarkesh's voice returned, and now Jake could hear something like laughter in it, bitter, exhausted, but genuine. I am committing treason, Jake Morrison. My entire fleet is committing treason. Because you are right, an empire that executes honor is not worth serving. And I find that I would rather die standing with warriors who remember what honor means than live serving an emperor who is forgotten. The first warship touched down in the desert, its ramp extending. From it emerged hundreds of saurian warriors, and at their head, a figure in armor that looked like it had been forged from black holes and dying stars. Fleet Commander Zarkesh. The commander approached the facility, and Jake found himself walking out to meet him, flanked by Vexthora and Crothar. When they stood face to face, Zarkesh lowered himself to one knee. "Jake Morrison, human of Earth, I pledged you the Annihilation Fleet, 12 capital ships, 4,000 warriors, and resources enough to wage war across a dozen systems. I pledge this not because you command us, but because you remind us what it means to be worthy of command. What is your will?" Jake looked at the kneeling commander, at the thousands of warriors emerging from the ships, at the representatives of a galactic empire who had turned their backs on everything they'd known because a broke cowboy had given his last meal to a stranger. "My will?" Jake said, and he couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. "My will is that we figure out what the hell we're supposed to do now. Because I've got about 5,000 alien warriors swearing loyalty to me, governments that are probably preparing to panic, and an emperor somewhere who's going to be really pissed off when he finds out about this." Zarkesh looked up, and there was something like a smile on those reptilian features. "Then perhaps we should ask ourselves what that human did 3 nights ago. Not what is safe, not what is expected, but what is right." "And what is right?" Jake asked. "That," Zarkesh said, rising to his feet, "is what we must discover together." 6 months later, Jake Morrison stood on a ridge overlooking what everyone was calling the Sanctuary, a sprawling compound built in the New Mexico desert, where the boundaries between human and Saurian had begun to blur in ways that would have seemed impossible half a year ago. The facility had grown from a secret military installation to something unprecedented, a place where 2 species were learning to coexist, to understand each other, to build something new from the ashes of what had been. The Saurian Empire had not taken the mass defection well. Emperor Zorvax had declared all who'd abandoned their posts to be enemies of the state, had sent assassination squads and diplomatic threats in equal measure. But something unexpected had happened. Other Saurian outposts, other fleets, other warriors had begun asking questions. If the Annihilation Fleet and the Imperial Guard had found something worth defecting for, what did that say about the empire they'd left behind? The rebellion was spreading. Slowly, quietly, but spreading nonetheless. And at its center, impossibly, was a cowboy from Nevada who still couldn't quite believe any of this was real. "Deep thoughts?" Commander Vexthora asked, approaching from behind with the near-silent grace all Saurians seemed to possess. "Just wondering how I got here," Jake admitted. 6 months ago, I was broke, homeless, heading nowhere. Now He gestured at the compound below, where human engineers worked alongside Saurian technicians, where children from nearby towns came for educational programs about alien culture, where warriors who'd conquered planets were learning about Earth customs and traditions. "Now you are the bridge," Vexthora said simply, "between species, between worlds, between what was and what might be." Jake shook his head. "I'm still just me. I didn't do anything special." "That is precisely what makes you special, Jake Morrison. You did not perform great deeds or demonstrate impossible power. You simply showed kindness when it would have been easier to show fear. You shared when it would have been easier to hoard. You stood for what was right when it would have been safer to stand aside." The warrior placed a clawed hand on Jake's shoulder. "These are not small things. These are the foundations of everything worth building." Below them, Jake could see Scoutkeeper Zinrith fully recovered, now leading a group of human scientists on a tour of a Saurian vessel, patiently explaining technology that was centuries beyond Earth's understanding. The scout had become something of a celebrity, giving interviews, writing about Saurian culture, serving as a translator between worlds. And always Zinrith told the same story. The story of a night in the desert, of kindness from a stranger, of how one small act had changed everything. "The Emperor has issued another ultimatum," Vexthora said quietly. "Return to the Empire within 30 days, or be permanently branded as outcasts. No warrior who defies this order will ever be allowed to return home." "How many want to go back?" Jake asked, though he dreaded the answer. "None," Vexthura said. "In 6 months, we have not lost a single warrior to doubt. Some have joined us from other fleets, drawn by stories of this place. But none have left." The commander's voice grew softer. "We have found something here we did not know we were searching for, purpose beyond conquest. Honor beyond obedience, meaning beyond empire." Jake thought about his own journey, about the ranch he'd lost, the life that had crumbled, the despair that had driven him into the desert. He'd thought he'd lost everything. But maybe he'd needed to lose everything to find what really mattered. "There's something I need to tell you," Jake said. "The UN has approved the treaty. Officially, as of tomorrow, this compound becomes sovereign territory, a place that belongs to neither Earth nor the Saurian Empire. A neutral zone where both species can meet, trade, learn from each other." "And you?" Vexthura asked. "What does this make you?" Jake laughed. "Apparently, I'm the governor. Or ambassador, or something. The politicians are still arguing about the title." He sobered. "But that's not what matters. What matters is that we've created a place where warriors who sought honor can find it. Where humans can learn they're not alone in the universe. Where two species can discover what they can build together." "You make it sound simple," Vexthura observed. "It's not. It's complicated as hell. There are cultural differences, communication barriers, people on both sides who think this is a terrible idea." Jake smiled. "But then I remember none of this happened because I had a plan. It happened because I gave someone food when they were hungry. Sometimes the most complicated things start with the simplest gestures." A transport vehicle pulled up below, and Jake recognized Colonel Martinez emerging, along with several diplomats and what looked like journalists. The world had finally learned about the sanctuary, and everyone wanted a piece of the story. Jake sighed. Time for more meetings. More explaining how all this happened. "You could simply tell them the truth," Vexthura suggested. "Which is?" "That honor recognizes honor. That kindness creates bonds stronger than any treaty. That sometimes the universe changes not through great battles or political maneuvering, but through one person choosing to do the right thing when no one is watching." Jake nodded slowly. "Think anyone will believe that?" "Does it matter?" Vexthura asked. "The warriors believe it. The humans here believe it. And slowly, across the galaxy, others are beginning to believe it too. Your emperor tried to execute us for treason. Instead, he gave us a cause worth fighting for." They walked down toward the compound together. The human and the warrior, the broke cowboy and the legendary soldier. Behind them, the sun set over the New Mexico desert, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. And ahead of them, in the growing complex of buildings and ships and impossible alliances, lights were coming on, human lights and Saurian lights, mingling together to create something neither species had seen before. Scout Keeper Zinrith met them at the entrance, translating device in hand. "Jake Morrison, the journalists wish to ask you the same question they always ask. How does it feel to be the human who changed galactic history?" Jake thought about it. He thought about the ranch, about his last $23, about the beans he'd shared because it was the right thing to do. He thought about the warriors who'd pledged their lives to him, about the rebellion spreading across the stars, about the sanctuary that had become a symbol of something humanity and Saurians both desperately needed. "Tell them," he said finally, "that I'm just a cowboy who fed a hungry stranger. Everything else ... Everything else is just what happens when you remember that kindness matters. That honor isn't about following orders. It is about doing what is right, even when it costs you everything. That sometimes the strongest thing you can do is show mercy." Zinrith translated, and Jake could see the journalists scribbling notes, recording audio, capturing video. They wanted a hero story, something grand and inspiring. But the truth was simpler and more profound than any story they could write. Later that night, after the meetings and interviews and endless discussions about treaties and territories, Jake found himself back on the ridge, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, an emperor plotted revenge. Somewhere out there, warriors were making the choice to join or oppose the growing rebellion. Somewhere out there, the future was being written in ways no one could predict. But here, in this moment, Jake Morrison was at peace. He thought about what his grandfather had told him once, that a man's worth isn't measured by what he owns or what he achieves, but by what he does when he has the choice to turn away and chooses instead to help. "Thank you, Grandpa," Jake whispered to the night, "for teaching me that." A sound behind him vexed Thora, once again appearing from nowhere. "You should rest, Jake Morrison. Tomorrow brings new challenges." "Tomorrow always does," Jake agreed. He turned to the warrior. "Can I ask you something? If I hadn't fed Zinrith that night, what would have happened?" Vex Thora considered this. The scout would have died. The Empire would have continued unchanged. We would have followed orders until the end of our days, never questioning, never doubting, never knowing that we had forgotten what we were meant to be. The warrior looked at Jake. "You gave us more than food that night. You gave us a mirror to see ourselves clearly. That is a gift beyond price." "And the cost?" Jake asked. "Warriors who can never go home. A rebellion that might fail. Humans and Saurians trying to build something with no guarantee it will work." "The cost," Vex Thora said softly, "is freedom. The freedom to choose honor over orders. The freedom to stand for what is right. The freedom to fail while trying to do something meaningful rather than succeed at something hollow." The warrior smiled. "I would pay that cost 1,000 times over." Jake nodded. Below them, the sanctuary glowed with light and life and possibility. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't safe. It wasn't guaranteed to last. But it was real, and it was built on the simplest foundation. The idea that kindness matters, that honor exists, that different worlds can find common ground if they're willing to try. "Commander," Jake said, "tell me honestly, do you think we can make this work? Really work? Building a place where humans and Saurians can coexist, where warriors can find purpose beyond war, where kindness is valued as much as strength." Vex Thora was silent for a long moment. Then, "I do not know, Jake Morrison. But I know this: before I met you, I had stopped believing such a thing was possible. Now I believe it is possible. That belief, that hope, is worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth living for." The warrior placed a hand over its chest in the gesture that had started everything. "You asked once what you could offer us, what a human with nothing could give to warriors from the stars. This is your answer. You gave us back our belief that the universe can be better than it is. That is no small gift." Jake smiled, feeling tears prick his eyes. "For what it's worth, you gave me something too. You gave me purpose when I thought I'd lost everything. You gave me family when I thought I was alone. You gave me proof that even when everything falls apart, sometimes it falls apart exactly the way it's supposed to, so something better can be built from the pieces." They stood together on the ridge, human and Saurian, looking out over the sanctuary and up at the stars. Tomorrow would bring challenges, diplomatic tensions, cultural clashes, threats from the Empire, skepticism from Earth. Tomorrow would be hard. But tonight, under the vast New Mexico sky, Jake Morrison allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Not the naive hope of someone who hasn't been beaten down by life, but the hard-earned hope of someone who has lost everything and discovered that what rises from the ashes can sometimes be stronger than what came before. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, about despair and kindness, about broken trucks and alien warriors, about the simple act of sharing that had changed worlds. And he understood, finally, what his grandfather had been trying to teach him all along, that we are never truly without purpose, that kindness is never wasted, that the smallest actions can ripple outward in ways we can never predict or control, that sometimes the most broken among us are the ones best suited to help others heal. Jake Morrison, broke cowboy from Nevada, had fed a hungry stranger in the desert. And in doing so, he had sparked a rebellion, bridged worlds, and reminded both humans and saurians of something they had forgotten: that honor matters, that mercy is strength, and that the future belongs to those brave enough to build it together. As he walked back down to the sanctuary, accompanied by his unlikely friend, Jake smiled. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in his life, he was ready to face it, not as a failure, not as a victim of circumstances beyond his control, but as someone who had learned the most important lesson of all: that we all have something to give. That kindness creates connections stronger than any empire. And that sometimes all it takes to change the universe is the courage to share what little we have with someone who needs it more. The stars watched over the sanctuary, and somewhere among them, other warriors were watching and wondering if honor still existed, if mercy still mattered, if it was possible to break free from empire and find something worth fighting for. And on a ridge in New Mexico, one human and one alien stood as proof that the answer to all those questions was yes. Yes, it was possible. Yes, it was worth it. And yes, it all began with kindness.